Amiri Baraka's Dutchman, 1964, is a powerful and provocative one-act play that premiered at the height of the civil rights movement. Originally written under the name Leroy Jones, Dutchman was Baraka's first dramatic work and remains his most widely known. Set almost entirely in a New York City subway car, the play features only two characters, Clay, a young black intellectual, and Lula, a mysterious white woman, whose seemingly flirtatious encounter rapidly descends into a volatile confrontation over race, power, and identity. The title alludes to the myth of the Flying Dutchman, a ghost ship doomed to sail the seas forever, symbolizing cycles of damnation and repetition. In Baraka's hands, the Dutchman becomes a metaphor for America's unending racial tensions, with the subway itself symbolizing a society locked into a relentless circuit of oppression and denial. Setting: the entire play takes place on a New York City subway train, which moves without stops or destinations. The setting becomes a metaphor for the inexorable, cyclical nature of racial conflict in America. The train is both claustrophobic and anonymous, a public space that becomes intensely personal. Characters: Clay, a 20-year-old, middle-class black man, well-dressed, articulate, and polite. He represents a generation of assimilated African Americans attempting to find a place within dominant white society through education and respectability. Lula, a 30-year-old white woman, seductive, erratic, and manipulative. She is both enchanting and dangerous, embodying the contradictions of white liberalism, erotic fascination with blackness, and deep-seated racism. Act 1 Act structure. The play opens with Clay seated alone in a subway car, reading a magazine. Lula enters, eating an apple, a symbolic gesture evoking Eve and original sin, and initiates a sexually charged conversation with Clay. She mocks his attire, his manners, and his presumed sexual desires, claiming to know intimate details about him despite having never met him. Lula flirts aggressively, oscillating between seduction and insult, playfulness and aggression. Clay tries to remain composed and civil, playing along with Lula's overtures while growing increasingly uncomfortable. As their conversation progresses, Lula's comments become more openly racist. She accuses black men of being sexually voracious, calls Clay a nigger, and mocks the notion that black people can assimilate through education and middle-class behavior. She taunts him about his inability to respond to white oppression without resorting to either submission or rage. Eventually, Lula's provocations cause Clay to explode in a furious monologue. He denounces the hypocrisy of white liberals and criticizes the expectation that black people should be passive and polite in the face of systemic violence. He speaks of the rage and power that lies beneath his outward calm, suggesting that black people could respond violently to their oppression, but choose not to, for now. Clay's speech is a moment of raw emotional truth, a verbal unmasking of America's racial double standards. But just as he finishes and appears to calm down, Lula pulls a knife from her purse and stabs him to death. She then enlists the help of other white passengers, who appear unmoved by the killing, to carry Clay's body off the train. The play ends as a new black passenger boards the train, and Lula begins her seduction cycle anew, suggesting the perpetual recurrence of racial violence. Character analysis. Clay is Baraka's symbol of the assimilated black man, educated, polite, culturally refined, and eager to be accepted by white society. His name evokes both earth and malleability, a figure molded by external forces, shaped by pressures to conform. At first, Clay attempts to maintain composure and civility. He responds to Lula's advances with polite amusement and rational engagement. But as her attacks intensify, Clay's inner rage surfaces, culminating in his explosive monologue. This shift from assimilation to fury illustrates the emotional toll of internalized racism. Yet Clay's ultimate fate, murder at the hands of Lula, implies that no amount of composure, education, or restraint can protect Black Americans from white violence and systemic oppression. He dies not for something he does, but for who he is, a black man whose mere existence threatens a fragile racial hierarchy. Lula. Lula is a disturbing embodiment of white liberal hypocrisy, sexual fascination, and racial violence. Her character is both allegorical and realistic. She plays the role of seductress, cultural gatekeeper, and executioner. She seems to know everything about Clay, suggesting she has encountered and mastered the type of black man who tries to integrate. Her flirtation is not just personal, it is political theater, a test of Clay's willingness to play the role assigned to him. By eating an apple as she enters, she evokes Eve from Genesis, introducing sin, corruption, and downfall. Yet Lula is not just a biblical figure. She is a representation of white America's predatory relationship with blackness, alternately admiring and destroying. Her final act, killing Clay and resuming her routine with the next black man, reveals her as a symbol of cyclical violence. She is a white liberal who claims to understand and love black people, but ultimately enacts their erasure. Major themes. 1. Race and identity. At its core, Dutchman is an intense critique of racial dynamics in America. Baraka exposes how white society perceives and manipulates black identity, especially when that identity deviates from expected roles. Clay's tragedy lies in his belief that he can engage Lula on equal footing, as a rational individual rather than a racialized body. But Lula does not allow this. She reduces him to a stereotype, projecting onto him all the fantasies and fears that white America holds about black men. Baraka suggests that black identity, in a white-dominated society, is always subject to misrecognition and control, and that the illusion of equality only masks deep-rooted hostility and power imbalance. 2. The illusion of integration. Clay represents the dream of racial integration through assimilation, that if black individuals dress well, speak properly, and pursue education, they can be accepted. Lula shatters this illusion by mocking Clay's manners and ultimately murdering him. Baraka critiques the liberal ideal of integration, exposing it as a trap. White society does not want black people to assimilate, it wants them to remain submissive. Clay's death dramatizes the futility of trying to be accepted on white terms. 3. Violence and repression. Clay's monologue reveals the rage repressed beneath black respectability. He speaks of the psychic violence inflicted on black people every day, and how society expects them to remain passive. He suggests that if black people acted on their justifiable anger, white society would collapse. His speech becomes a warning. Beneath the surface calm lies revolutionary potential. Lula's murder of Clay is a response not to violence, but to his refusal to conform. She kills him because he breaks the rules of engagement, he refuses to play along, and in doing so, exposes the truth. 4. Gender and power. Although the play primarily addresses race, it also engages with gendered power dynamics. Lula uses her sexuality as a weapon, seducing Clay and then humiliating him. She performs the role of the sexually liberated white woman, but her liberation is conditional. It exists only as long as she controls the narrative. Their interaction is a parody of interracial sexual politics, where desire is tangled with domination. Lula's seduction is not an invitation to intimacy. It is a trap, leading to Clay's emasculation and destruction. 5. The subway as a symbol. The subway represents America itself, a confined, mobile, and socially stratified space where different groups coexist without true interaction. It is also a vessel of repetition, circling endlessly without change. Clay and Lula's encounter occurs in a space that is public but impersonal. The subway's constant motion reinforces the futility of progress in a society stuck in racial loops. The fact that the train does not stop, and that a new black man boards at the end, signals that this cycle of seduction and violence will continue, unless broken. Language and style. Baraka's writing in Dutchman is poetic, incendiary, and allegorical. The dialogue is naturalistic in rhythm but laced with symbolism and social critique. Clay's monologue is the emotional climax of the play. It is a searing indictment of white hypocrisy and an affirmation of black anger. His speech shifts from calm eloquence to near-revolutionary rhetoric, mirroring the psychological explosion of a repressed people. Lula's speech is erratic and performative. She weaponizes casual conversation, using it to provoke, seduce, and attack. Her language is filled with coded racism, switching from flirtation to ridicule with chilling ease. The play's tone is intensely confrontational. Baraka forces the audience to witness uncomfortable truths, often breaking the fourth wall through theatrical intimacy and direct address. Historical and cultural context. Dutchman premiered in 1964, during a time of immense social upheaval. The civil rights movement was at its peak, but black radicalism was beginning to gain prominence. Leaders like Malcolm X and the Black Panthers began to challenge the philosophy of nonviolence and integration advocated by Martin Luther King Jr. Baraka, once part of the beat literary scene, became a militant black nationalist, believing that art must serve revolutionary goals. Dutchman reflects this ideological shift. It is a work of artistic rebellion, rejecting liberalism and confronting white audiences with the realities of systemic racism. The play remains relevant in contemporary discourse, especially in the context of Black Lives Matter, police brutality, and the persistence of racial violence. Its themes resonate with ongoing debates about respectability politics, structural inequality, and interracial dynamics. Symbolism. 1. The apple. Lula's apple is a direct allusion to the biblical Eve, suggesting that she introduces temptation, knowledge, and sin. It also symbolizes America's founding myth, the apple pie idealism that masks a history of violence and exclusion. 2. The knife. Lula's knife is the ultimate symbol of white violence cloaked in civility. It is hidden until the very end, much like systemic racism, always present, but often obscured by smiles and manners. 3. The subway train. The subway symbolizes social entrapment, infinite loops of injustice, and the machinery of white supremacy. No one controls its direction. It simply moves forward, cycling through the same experiences. Conclusion. Amiri Baraka's Dutchman is a brutal, brilliant examination of America's racial psychosis. Through the charged, deadly encounter between Clay and Lula, the play exposes the lies of integration, the performance of liberal tolerance, and the repressed violence beneath polite society. It is not a play that comforts, it accuses, demands, and confronts. Baraka challenges the audience to recognize that the theater is not a place for passive consumption, but for revolutionary witnessing. In Dutchman, Baraka builds a theatrical trap, forcing us to ride the subway of American racism, again and again, until we decide to break the cycle.